Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stuart Chapman. I, along with my colleague Shea McCarthy, are at a lobbying firm in DC called Thorn Partners. We've had the very good fortune of working with Solve MECFS over the last year and a half, and we got to experience your fly-in day last year as well. So Shea and I have worked between us for 5 members of Congress. We have, on that side of the hill, have done hundreds of meetings, maybe thousands. And on the other side of the hill where we exist now, and very similar to you, have led or been part of hundreds of meetings. So we're just going to try to provide a few tips today on how to make next week successful. So one very important thing to remember is to remember the atmospherics of the offices that you're going to be dealing with. Congress is back in session. We're at the beginning of a new Congress still here, even in April. They are doing big bills. We've already done a COVID package. They are coming back into session and started yesterday in what is going to be a very intense period. They're going to be negotiating major infrastructure legislation. And it's important to remember that when you're meeting with these offices. There is a possibility, a real possibility, you will not necessarily get to meet with the member. That's okay. Staffers for these offices are essentially the life of these offices. They make policy. You may be talking to a 24-year-old or a 25-year-old, but they are making those decisions for that office, for that member of Congress, and frankly, for any of the sort of legislation that comes out of that office. If you are speaking with a member, you want to give them the key points and then follow up with staff if needed, whether it's that day or as we'll talk about later on. Be prepared for the possibility that the time of the meeting could be fluid, could start late, could end early, or it may get moved during the course of the day. This is just a reality. Many of you have experienced this before. We're just going to be even more flexible online and through these virtual meetings as much, and if not more, than we would if they were in person, but we will all make it work. Shea, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Stuart. Shea McCarthy here, and I thought that was a great overview to start our presentation, Stuart. One thing that I think is so vital to take away, and frankly, that a lot of first-time advocates are surprised by when they lobby on Capitol Hill, is really the youth of the key staffers that are making policy decisions that are instrumental in whether it's the healthcare policy or other issues that are really running our country. And so if you get a clean-shaven 25-year-old staffer, that person very well may be handling the healthcare portfolio for an incredibly influential member of Congress and be their key advisor. And so just because you're looking at someone across the Zoom camera who looks like they're young enough to be, your children or grandchildren for that matter, you should take comfort in the fact knowing that the meetings that have been set up are with the influential people in these offices, and your message is getting to the right people when connecting with these staff members.
Absolutely. Great point, especially on the House side. They often skew toward younger. These are people writing legislation. They are making decisions for the country, no doubt about it. 3 things to think about as you're coming into the meeting. And this is even true, especially now in a virtual environment. These meetings are being run in 15-minute increments. So you want to go in, you want to be brief, you want to be brilliant, and then you want to be done. So we want to get right to the talking points. 25% to 35% of COVID patients known as long haulers are experiencing long-term symptoms. Check. All long haulers face job loss, disability, and a broken medical care system. It could cost from the chronic illnesses over $4 trillion in the next decade. And then third, please support the COVID-19 Long Haulers Act. Please co-sponsor this bill, which will be introduced this month by Congressman Don Beyer. The most important thing, do not get bogged down with details.
Yes, Stuart, it's One of the most important things that I think we're going to touch on during this presentation is storytelling. That's going to be such an important part of why, as a constituent, you're able to compel a member of Congress to care about your issue. But connecting that story to what the ask is equally important. And so making sure that you're taking an opportunity both at the front end of the meeting to outline, we're here today to ask for your support for the COVID Long Hauler Act, and we're going to tell you why. And at the end of the meeting, we would be so grateful to have your boss's support for the COVID Long Hauler Act. Sort of putting bookends on the storytelling that's going to be the crux of your meeting is going to be important to make everything come full circle. That's how you're connecting the dots from problems or practical issues that people around the country are facing to member of Congress and staff. This is what you can do to solve it.
And just to underscore that, thanks to your Solve team with Emily and Jesse, they will get the documents they need, this office. We will get them the information they need. But Shea's 100% right. These offices don't necessarily focus. I mean, remember, they're representing 720,000 people on the House side. They have as many as 18 staffers, but usually far fewer, who are covering those 720,000 people. And they're being hit from every direction all day long, materials. What breaks through? Something local, as in you, and exactly as Shea said, that narrative, that story. This is exactly why Emily and Jesse and the whole team pair you up with your local members. That's what members of Congress will respond to. Be nice. Sounds like a truism, but it couldn't be more true. There are these staffers are often times taking dozens and dozens of meetings a day, and just your intention here, it's not just a matter of being nice and diplomatic. This is not to be meant to be a one-off, and Emily's done a phenomenal job with this. This is meant to be a long-term relationship. Going into this office, you want to be able to go back to them in 3 weeks, in 3 months, in 3 years. So we want this to be, if you're meeting these staffers for the first time, and there is turnover on the Hill, obviously, you want to have that relationship in such a way that even if that staffer leaves somewhere down the line, you will be able to continue that relationship with the office. That is couldn't possibly the most important slide here.
And Stuart, I know both you and I have been on the other side of the table meeting with constituents as staffers, where you sometimes get a sense of entitlement and, I'm a constituent, so you have to do this for me. Advocacy is an art, and telling your story and being convincing and persuasive and charming is part of the art of being effective at this. So it can't be understated, and it's an important but common sense point to hit on, because we've seen it happen firsthand where people maybe get a little frustrated, or your meeting is running late and you feel frustrated, and the last thing you want to do is to take that out on the staffer. But hopefully that goes without saying. But anyway, I think it's an important point, and we can move on.
Exactly. Meeting tips. So just to go through some of these, do not obviously stick to your schedule. Don't miss a scheduled meeting. And as we'll talk about in a few minutes, please check in and sign on at least 5 minutes early, not only to ensure that you're there in case the staffer comes in early, but also, as I noticed last year with these meetings, it gives all of us a chance who are on the call in advance to sort of to coordinate, what that call is going to look like. Again, no call, no shows reflect very poorly on your organization. To the extent that you are there, if you please be on time, make sure someone is there for that meeting. Cancellations and running late, and Emily or Jesse may want to add more on this, but if something is going on or something's not working out as far as your timing, make sure to reach out to the Advocacy Associates phone number to give them notice. Do not reschedule the meeting on your own. This is being done from a centralized place. And again, to echo something that Shea said earlier, I can remember even after 15 years, either bad scheduling experiences or issues with constituents. So don't be that person that is remembered. This is a long-term relationship. Get there, be there. The meeting will be fantastic. just make sure you are there to begin that process. Jesse, you want to start? Go to the next one. Stay on message. From the opening, introduce yourself, share your personal experiences, and emphasize those real world impacts on healthcare constituents in the district. Remember, your stories are the ones that matter here. Emily and Jesse and Stuart and Shea can get them, all the sort of background documentation that they need, but they want to hear those local voices. And that's why you're doing the fly-in day next week. Right from the beginning, having straight in, jumping into the meeting, sharing who you are, sharing your experiences will resonate with staff and with the member. Speak plainly. You're going to have talking points that you want to go to. If you can walk out of that, if the meeting ends and that staffer or that member can remember one thing, that's phenomenal. That is a massive breakthrough. And that's the key. They'll remember your stories. They'll remember what you've said about your situation, but to leave them with one leave behind. And Emily and Jesse and the team have done a great job of ensuring that this buyer bill is going to be introduced. And so that is the thing. We want to give them something tangible that they can lock on to and can be invested in the cause. Also on this, talk about, again, the real world experiences. That's what they want to hear about. They want to hear from you directly. Go ahead.
One point I want to make, Stuart, is as you're focused on getting across a message, you will be armed with some talking points about the legislative background, but I would highly encourage you to stay within your comfort zone. It's kind of obvious when a self-advocate is faking it or loose on the details. So don't try to cite statistics that you're not fluent in. Don't try to speak to an element of the legislation that you might not know. If you get a question from staff on something that you can't answer, tell them that you'll circle back with the team and get back to them. A staff member would much rather get a response in writing a day or two later that they know is accurate than have an advocate try to answer a question that they don't necessarily know the answer to in a way that kind of damages your credibility. So to maintain your credibility for difficult questions that you're not able to answer, make sure that you just politely let them know, I'm actually not sure about that. Let me circle back with our team and I know we'll be able to get back to you.
And moving on, and Emily, we're mindful sort of the time here. Establishing roles, going in, get on the call a few minutes early. This happened several times last year. Some were small meetings, some were larger. Figure out with your team leader who is going to be, introducing each of you. Who is the constituent? That should be the voice that should be the loudest voice in that conversation. Not everyone needs to speak. So if you don't feel you'd like to, don't feel pressure to do so. To use one of Shea's phrases there, stay within your comfort zone. We do need, however, to make sure that that constituent is definitely identified on the call. A congressman, Lucy is from, Four Corners, or Congresswoman, Bill is from Trinity. Making that connection will ensure, again, this long-term relationship, not just for you, but for the organization to have with that office. If you ever get stuck on anything on the talking point, Shea's exactly right. We can always go back with details. We can always go back with data, but use your talking points. Go back to that one sentence. Go ahead, Jesse. Don't assume that staff knows too much or too little about the topic you want. We had some great meetings last year in which advocates said right at the beginning, do you know much about this subject? Some said, absolutely. My sister has MECFS, right? And then that was, you knew where the leaping off point. Or someone would say, this is my first week as the healthcare LA for Congressman Smith. Could you fill me in on a little bit? And so getting them up to speed, understanding your audience, very important there. You can go ahead to the next one, Jesse, which I think is the last two more. Yep. Keeping the relationship. always offer to be that resource. I can't tell you how many times we say this in meetings. When we're walking out the door, Emily Taylor's phenomenal at this. Hey, let us know what we can do. Solve MECFS. If you have a hearing coming up, if you have questions about this, reach out to us. We can get you the expert you need. So that should be an ask of the office. Please call us if you run into issues or you have questions. Let me know how we can be helpful. Always frame the issue about how it will not only help the group and constituents, but the member. If Congressman Smith ever needs any help around this issue on his committee, on her committee, please let us know. Always thank them for the time, these staff, and ask them if they need any additional information before ending the conversation. And then 1 or 2 weeks after the meeting, wait just a little bit of time, but check in with that staffer. And again, this is a long-term relationship. What that staffer will put away in his or her head is that the next time they have a question around this, they will have already branded you as, in a good way, as the resource that they need to check in with. So it happened this week with last few weeks, Emily on a committee of jurisdiction, where they reached out to her to ask her to be sort of the source on a number of things. That's exactly what you're trying to do with the individual office and the member of Congress in your neighborhood. Contact information. Before that call ends, make sure if you're a constituent of that congressperson, you're forging that relationship, you want to leave your contact information. Do not say, we'll see you next year. Next time at the fly-in, next year at the fly-in, we'll see you again. No. Say, do you mind if I follow up in a few weeks? I'd like to just make sure to see if you need anything. And then the best staff contact info from the call, sometimes you might be talking to the member and you can say, Congresswoman Herrera Butler, can you tell me, should I reach out to Emily? Should I reach out to Sam? Who should I reach out to about these issues? And having that contact, having that umbilical cord to the office is going to be major, major, major. One last slide. And then on the team leads, you want to call in even earlier, around 10 minutes early. You're going to many of you already know this because you're experienced in this realm. Start the meeting, make those introductions, state that one sentence, and I can't underscore this enough. Identify that constituent. So important for these offices. Help everyone find an opportunity to speak as a team lead. Make sure that everyone in that meeting, whether it's 2 people or even 12, that they're able to introduce themselves. Time management, watch the clock. Shea and I spend our lives seemingly every day sort of dealing with meetings and with clients where you have to know exactly, like, we are running up against 10 minutes or 12 minutes or 14 minutes. We need to get to a wrapping up point. And speaking of wrapping up, make sure you thank all of your fellow participants who've been part of that. Thank the staff, thank the member, invite any sort of final input that anyone may have. And again, underscore one more time that one sentence that they need to be left with and that needs to be conveyed to them. Shea, you have any last thoughts?
No, that's perfect, Stuart. The last thing that I'll say in closing is we don't use that term ask as an idiom. Ask is the thing that you want. And so after you make your presentation, I would just remind people, try to get that feedback or that sense of commitment during this meeting. So you're going to have 10 to 15 minutes to kind of present and make your case. And it doesn't need to be something that's applied with a lot of pressure, but after your presentation, it's totally appropriate to say, does this sound like the kind of thing that Senator Smith would be supportive of? So the ask part is potentially that opportunity where you're going to get a commitment or you're going to get a sense for what should my follow-up say? Because if they've said, I'll look into it, I need to go to my legislative director or my chief of staff above me, or let me talk to my boss about this. That way, when you follow up with them in 2 weeks, you know what to say. Oh, how did that conversation go with your boss? Have you had a chance to talk to them yet? So that's the last thing that I'll really leave you with that I think is important during these meetings.